Welcome to Chautauqua Books. I'm Roy Harvey. My guest today is Walter Mays, but we've got three guests from the Highlights Foundation that has a writer's workshop here in Chautauqua the week of July 15th to July 22nd. And we've been really fortunate in getting three writers and from that conference from various parts of the United States. Walter is from San Francisco.
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Your book is as a large guide to kids' literature, to children's literature, up to age 14.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically, with your co-author, put together a list of about 8,000 books and then narrowed it down to about 2,000, right?
Yeah, well, Valerie and I started to make up a list of writers that we really liked and books that we really respected, and we wanted to be very thorough, and we didn't want to leave anybody out, and before we knew it, we were up to 8,000, and it started to get crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
And 8,000 of these, how many of these do you actually read?
All of them.
Really? 8,000
That's
books?
the sick part of it, yes. That's what we do.
That's...
Valerie and I read and read and read and read and read. You know, Valerie and I have collectively been in the children's book business for almost 50 years, right. So we have a lot of experience between the two of us, and there's a lot of reading time that goes in there. Now, I will be honest with you, some of the books that are reviewed in here, Valerie likes more than I do, and some of the books that are reviewed in here, I like more than Valerie, so when it came time to reread them for the book, not both of us reread the book.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have a nice little mechanism of putting a caricature
right.
Of
yeah.
the two of you in there.
Well, it was very funny. We ran into some problems with the logistics of this book and the design, and we were talking with our editor saying, is there a way you can give us Valerie talking as opposed to when we are talking in one voice? Mm-hmm. Well, Valerie wants to break out of the one voice and just talk on her own, or I want to talk on my own. And our editor said, well, you can come up with some sort of a visual icon, and the graphic designer was uninspired, to say the least, on this book. So Valerie and I made some phone calls really quickly, and we called 3 illustrators that we knew who illustrate children's books, and one of them got back to us that very same day, and it's Caldecott winner Peggy Rathman, and she won a Caldecott for a book called Officer Buckle and Gloria, and Peggy lives in San Francisco and is known to Valerie and myself, and we said, we need somebody to draw little caricatures of us really, really quickly. She had them to us the next day. We FedExed them to our editor that afternoon. I mean, it was amazing. So, and it really helped part of the book. Right. So now in the book, whenever I speak, my head pops up. Whenever Valerie speaks, her head pops up. So it's a really clever device.
And when you're both speaking, essentially no head pops up.
Right. The vast majority of the book is written in a unison voice.
Yeah, right. There was the cutoff of 14. Why did you cut off? What was the criteria there?
We had to stop somewhere. The book was going to be 1,200 pages long. We made an arbitrary line in the sand, and unfortunately, we did not do enough of a job on the 12 to 14-year-olds, and luckily our publisher agrees with us, so there will be a second book, and it won't be called Valerie and Walter's Best Books for Teens, but it's something along those lines, and we're working on that right now.
I noticed that probably most of the writers, staff at your conference here, the Highlights Foundation conference, were in the book, most of the ones who've written books. Was that pretty much your experience?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while, we chose books, not authors. We chose books that worked for us, and so there were some instances where there were people that we really, really liked very much, and oh, by golly, what do you know? One of her books didn't make it in here. Oops, sorry, you know. And I'm sure there might be the converse, but it doesn't come immediately to mind.
Right. I was one of the things I was thinking was the book I interviewed an author from the show last time, and his wasn't in there, but it was a very good book. But people don't come up to see you and say, hey, what happened here?
Unfortunately, every once in a while that does happen, and we try to smile graciously. But that's, anytime you put yourself out there as somebody who is trying to, be the arbiter of taste, someome's going to go up to you and say, hey, buddy, your taste stinks.
What do you do with these books? I mean, 8,000 books. You donate them to libraries and whatever?
Well, I like to tell people I live in a 2-bedroom house with 5 bedrooms worth of books.
So you live in a library.
I have a lot of them. But I have schools that I donate books to. I have There's a project in San Francisco called the Children's Book Project that takes books and publishers' materials like advanced reading copies of books and donates them to teachers who would not otherwise have the ability to get books in the classroom.
Now, you're primarily writing for librarians or parents and teachers, or what?
I would like to think we struck a balance and made this book useful for anybody who has a child in their life. We've tried really to make something that the librarians and teachers would like, but that parents and grandparents and doctors and social workers and anybody who's got a kid and wants to know what's a good book for them.
Right. What's your experience with regard to publishers? Do you find that some publishers are publishing the best books, or some other oddball publishers are getting a really good book now and then?
Some publishers have their strengths and are able to do really good work in a particular area consistently, but you can't ever say, I know this publisher, I know what this publisher publishes, I don't need to think about them, because next season they'll come up with one that'll surprise you.
The book, Shabana, we're going to be interviewing the author in a few minutes, but talking to her. But that's a book that certainly goes over 14 in a way.
Well,
but it includes in terms of kids' ages.
Sure. Well, Shabana was one of those books that once you're old enough for it, you're never too old for it. I mean, you can read Shabana at 85 and it's a brilliant read. Valerie and I say that a lot about kids' books. We try to stress to people that children's books are not necessarily a ghetto that you only read when you're a certain age and then you stop. Some of the best writing in the world is written by children's writers, and they have to do everything that an adult writer does, but they have to do it with less.
Right. How do you characterize a children's book, say, for teenagers versus an adult book? What's the primary criteria that you'd say, okay, this goes into adult?
If the central protagonist is a teenager, generally, I will go with that. And using that as a criteria, Catcher in the Rye is a young adult novel.
Really?
And of course, it was published before there was such a thing as young adult novels. But if it were published today, it would be a YA.
What about has there been a change in literature, children's literature? As a kid, I used to read biographies and autobiographies, and they seemed to be mostly what was there, except for the sort of classics that you had around. Or was that just my own bias, do you think?
Well, I think it reflects your own bias. There was a lot of varying types of books available for children when you and I were kids. However, in the last 15 years, there has been an explosion in the children's book market, and now there are way, way more books than there ever were before in a variety of different formats, and really talented writers and illustrators and graphic designers and editors and anthologizers are working very hard to sort of expand the notion of what is a children's book. And it's showing up on the shelves. It shows up in the marketplace, it shows up in what our kids are reading, it shows up in what the teachers and the librarians are recommending, and hopefully it shows up in what Valerie and I are trying to keep on top of, because it expanded really tremendously in the early 90s. There was a little bit of a shrinking in the marketplace, and now we're settled into a nice groove.
And how do you account for that mostly? I mean, there's a lot of competition for that market, and just really has to hustle?
It was money. People in the late 80s and the early 90s...
a lot of income.
There was part of it was income, part of it was the expansion of where books were sold into places that were not traditionally thought of as book markets. So books were suddenly sold in mass merchandisers like Target and Walmart and Kmart and all those places, and at the grocery store. And the next thing you knew, you turned around and it was 1992, and no matter where you went, children's books were for sale. That's a pretty big market, and publishing had to hustle to come up with enough, pardon the expression, product as opposed to books to fill all those shelves and all those spaces. That's what drove the expansion.
Do you have particular favorites among, you must.
Well, Valerie and I went through this book, and we put stars next to the books that we thought were the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the ones that we dearly loved. And so I think out of the 2,200, 2,500 books that are listed in here, 121 books got stars. And at one point we had to stop. We had to say, no more stars. That's it. And the star, by the way, this is the great rule about the stars. Valerie and I said no books could get starred unless we both thought it was brilliant. And then she wanted to give a star to a book that I didn't think was brilliant, and I wanted to give it. And so then we made this deal that each of us could have 5 books that the other one didn't think was brilliant that could get the star. And I think we finally got it up to each of us got 8. But in any case, there are no books in here that either of us thinks is bad, or that we think is inappropriate, or it's just Valerie and I have very strong tastes, and one of us is bound to like something more than the other. But the vast majority of them are books we both adore.
Really? What about your own? I mean, do you have any other time to read anything that's not a children's book?
Yeah, sometimes when you're reading kids' books all the time, when you do it for work, you sometimes just have to like walk out of your office and say, no more children's books. So I read a lot of magazines, a lot of newspapers, and I have certain fiction writers. I'm a total Stephen King junkie. I've been reading Stephen King ever since 1976, and I read everything he ever writes, and he's wonderful. And for people that are interested in writing, he's just written a book on writing called On Writing by Stephen King, and it's brilliant. So I love him.
Well, tell me a little bit about Walter the Giant.
Oh, you mean my other life?
Yeah, what's going on there?
Well,
I mean, is it Walter the Giant storyteller?
Walter the Giant Storyteller. I am professionally known around the world as Walter the Giant Storyteller, and I go to schools, libraries, bookstores, conferences, pretty much anywhere there's an audience that wants to hear stories. And I usually use books as my jumping off point because I'm trying to be this sort of roving, jovial ambassador for literature. I'm trying to use books as a way to tell stories to kids in a very energetic, very lively way that makes the kids go, ooh, that looks like fun to me. And then they go to their library or go to their bookstore and hopefully want to check out the books. Authors love it because when I read their books, lots of copies sell.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And this is through television as well, and
I've done it.
radio.
I've never had a television program, but I've been on lots of television shows, radio programs, cable, the internet. I mean, you name it. I've done it wherever the work is.
What are some of the books that you like that don't get the kind of publicity that you think they deserve?
Oh, well, I can give you one title right now. It's a book that Valerie and I both love. It's a picture book that's in here, and it's a book by a woman named Leah Komaiko called I Like the Music. And it's a story about a little girl going with her grandmother to a concert in the park. But it's a very rhythmic, wonderful read aloud that starts off with a little girl saying, she's sitting in the orchestra, the box, watching the orchestra, and she says, I do not like this concert hall. This concert hall's no fun at all. The orchestra just plays and plays, and I could be here for 30 days. And I must sit here in my seat. Don't clap your hands. Don't tap your feet. And Grandma says this is a treat. But I like the music in the street. And then the author changes the rhythm, and you get this. I like the beat of my feet when my shoes hit the street, and I rap-a-tap-a-tappa on the hot concrete. No parade, just the maid with her Dixieland mop, sopping with the bopping all around the bus stop. And she goes back and forth between the very staid rhythms of the concert hall and then the jangly, wonderful rhythms of an urban, environment. And then it all comes together at an outdoor concert where she suddenly realizes that you can have the outdoors, the city, and the music all at the same time. It's a wonderful book to read to a child before she goes to her first concert.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of our little hidden gems that we really like.
And you both started, obviously.
And we both, that's a star for both of us. Yeah. Right. And there's novels, there's poetry, there's nonfiction, there's books of reference for kids. We don't just cover one type of book. We really do try to cover anything that your child would be interested in reading.
Do you find that the girls and boys sort of switch? Do boys read some of the books that are aimed at girls, do you think, as much as the obverse?
Marketing-wise, we've pretty much taught boys not to read books that are aimed at girls. It's not that they won't, but they wouldn't be caught dead in public doing it. Girls, the philosophy is that girls will always read books that boys will read. Because girls, in theory, always want to know what boys are up to, so they'll read the books and that will tell them something. If you put too, quote, girly a cover on a book, it's going to drive any self-respecting boy away from being publicly identified with reading that book. But, The Secret Garden, lots of girls love and read The Secret Garden. Harriet the Spy, lots of girls love and read Harriet the Spy, and boys read it. They just tend to go underground because they're not getting the support from the culture, they're not getting the support from their families. We don't send a very good message to boys where reading is concerned. And that's another thing that I try to do as Walter the Giant Storyteller. Hey, I'm a boy, I'm a giant boy, it's fun, let's read, let's go have fun.
Well, one of the questions that I'm sure a lot of people I have, and it's probably one you get all the time, but Harry Potter. Is it in here?
Harry Potter isn't in here because this book went to press right before Valerie and I read it.
Really?
But believe me, if we had read it before we finished the book, we would have, and it will be in the next edition. When Valerie and I went out,
first edition here.
This is the first edition, and the second edition will be out in about 16 months. Valerie and I went out on tour for this book, and we did CNN and CBS This Morning and all these different things. And everywhere we went, we brought a list of 5 books that if we could put these in our book, we would. And Harry Potter was #1. And there are people all over this country that first heard about Harry Potter from Valerie and me, because we read it really early on. We didn't know it was going to be as big as it turned out to be. I mean, come on, no one could guess that. How do I account for it?
Right.
We were just talking about it earlier. There aren't any wars. There isn't anything else for CNN to cover. It's a big news story. It's a good economy, and it's a really good book. So media hype and the publisher being in the right place at the right time, and a book that kids spread through word of mouth, and that's what made it happen, I think.
Really?
It couldn't have happened if it was not well written. It could not have happened.
I see. Sure. Are biographies as big as they were in the past, or at least they were in the past to me?
I think biographies are bigger now, because
Really?
what has happened is we've freed up nonfiction writers from having to write 128 pages of very dry as dust text with an 8-page black and white photo insert and then a bibliography at the back. Biographies now have graphics in them and shorter chapters sometimes that kids who aren't like you, that didn't automatically gravitate towards biographies and that need a little break and need their stories told in a little bit more lively way. So there's lots of different ways to tell biography now. And so you can still get great big fat long biographies of the life of, Daniel Boone or Amelia Earhart, but you can still also get biographies of whole peoples, races, cultures, groups. One publisher did a whole biography on the Beatles that I thought was utterly fascinating, and each chapter was about each of the guys, and it was done with tons of different graphics and photographs, and they don't look like what we think biographies used to look like when we were kids, and it's drawn a lot of kids who might not read anything else into reading.
Really. The book we're going to be talking about next is this Reluctant Readers, Ron Job. I find it extraordinary that there's such an attempt to match the book with the child, or the obverse rather, to find the kind of area that is interesting to the kid, to get him to read. You do some of that in here too.
We try wherever possible, but you'll find when you talk to Ron, there are very few people in this world who know as much about how to motivate educators to put the right book in the right kid's hand, because a lot of times the teachers don't always know what the right book is. They're looking for a resource, they're looking for someone to guide them, and it's people like Ron, people like Valerie and me, people like authors who go out on the road and speak in front of schools and libraries. They're the ones who are saying the answers are there, they're right there, all you have to do is just take the time to look for them, and we'll help you find the right book for the kid. I think sometimes, even more than the right book at the right time, the thing we have to worry about is the wrong book. Shoving a book down a kid's reluctant throat goes a very long way towards turning them into reluctant readers.
Really?
So you have to be careful sometimes.
And of course there's a lot of competition. I mean, television is a big draw, isn't it?
Television is not the Antichrist, but television unbridled, television unwatched, without an adult there helping limit and shape and guide what the kid is seeing. Television is a dangerous tool, and it can be the death of reading. However, I watched so much TV when I was a kid, and I read when I was a kid, so it doesn't work that way with every child.
Right.
I'm a total idiot.
Well, you've seen books over the many years. I mean, closely 25 years,
Yeah.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Have you seen many of these, some of your favorites, turned into film?
Oh, sure. I think the best example of a children's book turned into a film is Babe, the Gallant Pig, which became the movie Babe. That was actually almost, all right, I'll say it, that was actually a better movie than it was a book. And I liked the book. I liked the book very much, but the movie just blew me away.
Really?
More often than not, when they make adaptations of books into movies, you sometimes find them lacking.
Right. Well, it seems to me that, I mean, I just really realized it, but because of the lack of interior monologue, I guess, children's books often lend themselves to film much more easily than the so-called adult fiction.
Well, I have to take umbrage at lack of interior monologue.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
really young children's books, perhaps. But once you get over about the age of 8, those writers. I mean, did you meet Jerry Spinelli?
Right.
You know, Jerry.
I was thinking of
talk
that,
about
too.
an interior monologue
Right,
the guy's got going in some of his
Right.
books. Children have all of that, and it's in all of the fiction
That's
by
true.
the good writers. But you're right, picture book level. You're right. There's one level going on usually in most picture books, but take a perfectly wonderful classic like Stuart Little. I mean, they destroyed it for the movie. Now the movie was a totally entertaining thing on its own merits. If you had never read Stuart Little before.
Right.
But it's very hard for somebody who loved E.B. White's classic book to then go watch that movie and see what they did to it and be happy about the movie.
Yeah. Well, Walter, we're out of time. I'm sure we should have more time, but it's great. Great. Well, that's great. That's what it's all about, isn't it? All right. Thanks
Well, thank
very much.
you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And we'll be right back with our next guest, Ron Job. Okay. Welcome back. We are talking now to Ron Jobe. He is the co-author of Reluctant Readers with Mary Dayton Sakari, I believe. Sakari. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
It's a marvelous book you've got.
Well, thank you.
It's Reluctant Readers. The idea is that there's a whole mass number of reasons why kids are not getting into books.
Right.
And that's what you explore.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, to get some background on yourself, CBC in Vancouver, BC.
That's right. I teach at the University of British Columbia.
Right.
I'm in the Faculty of Education, but my true love and mission in life is children's literature, very much like you heard from Walter ahead of time. And Mary is a reading specialist, and she conducts the reading clinics at the University of British Victoria.
Right.
And so it's a nice combination to work together.
Yeah. Well, in this book, basically, you're trying to match the child up with an appropriate book to get them to stimulate some reading there. And tell us what the primary reason why kids are reluctant to read. I mean, the whole number of strategies are just marvelous, but.
Okay, why exactly? Well, we find that one of the reasons that they may be reluctant to read is that they don't value reading. Two things: they don't value themselves, and they don't value the reading. Reading is not pleasurable to them. They see no value in reading from a lot of kids. And this is a situation that we found. That's why we tried to look at the type of kids. The kids that say, I can't read. The ones that are waiting for they're waiting for a light to come down from above, and all of a sudden all the information will go into their heads. And they don't want to work at it. They don't understand that you have to work at reading. They look around at other kids and say, oh, they just learn. You just learn like that. They've not had that pleasure at home. I think a lot of the problems is that a lot of parents haven't taken the time to actually read, model, and get those kids so excited when they were little that they wanted to read. Kids will read before they come to school if the parents are really involved with them.
That's extraordinary that, I mean, some kids, you see a lot of parents that are reading, and yet the child is not reading, and there are complex reasons for that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes parents read a lot, and they have a child that doesn't read, and that's very frustrating. And they can't sort of comprehend it. But we also have to look at how reading styles have changed today. You know, we used to eat, same as our food styles, we used to eat 3 full meals a day, and now we don't do that. We graze, and that's how we read. And so when we're concerned about kids that they're reading, that they have to read certain books, take a look at what they're actually reading. And we'll talk about boys, because boys, because of our culture, reading is not exactly, especially fiction reading, is sort of considered a luxury, or why bother, you need to find facts. A lot of boys are info kids. They're really after the facts. They want to know that. Where we have to go as educators and as parents is we have to provide those, we have to go with the interest of the child. And that is sometimes the hardest thing to find out. Teachers in classrooms have big classrooms, and a child will say, yep, I like car racing. They don't care about car racing. They just told you something to get you off their backs. And so you have to find out what it is. And if it's horses?
They do it because of peer pressure and a variety of reasons. I mean, they're just saying that.
Yeah, exactly,
right.
exactly. So once you can find out what it is, and for younger kids, a lot of times it's dinosaurs. Well, if you're a parent and you've got a child that's interested in dinosaurs, go with it. Get the books, look at magazines that talk about dinosaurs, get on the web, anything you can do, take them to museums, but focus with that. Don't worry about the other reading. Get them to read. Many of these kids can read. Seriously, they've got the phonics skills. They can read if it's of value to them. And this is where they very often they don't see
and
it.
you talk about the fact that a child will read at a much higher level if he's interested in the book. That's a big...
especially science areas.
Right.
Absolutely, very much so. If they want to know about chemistry, sports areas, if they want to know about that, they'll read it. They love to read they want highly illustrated materials. Kids today are really visual, and publishers, thanks to the British company Doherty and Kindersley, have really changed information books. I'm using that term, not nonfiction, because it's really, many information books are fictional, so therefore that's what I prefer to use as information books. But you take a book like the Guinness Book of Records, that should be in every household, just because I give it as friends to my friends who are dads, because I know that the boys will get it, you see, and they just take it away and they read it. They're fascinated with facts. Well, as soon as you hear what they're fascinated with, go with it. Get other materials.
One of the things that is extraordinary in here, and that is the kind of rigor that's required of many teachers to actually do the assessment of the child to find out where they are, like you've already said, to go so far as to videotape perhaps a session with the child, so you get a sense of your own impatience or attitude and so forth.
Yes, that's true. Teachers are forced to, and professionally they need to take formal assessment tests. But what we're trying to say in there is, look, put the child first, but also remember about you as a person. And so that's why we suggest that they videotape, that they tape, because as teachers, we have a low patience level. And unfortunately, that means that less than 30 seconds after we ask a question, well, we expect an answer. A lot of kids can't respond that fast. They have to have time to process it and then give the answer.
Right.
So we're saying, look, take a step back, look at what you're doing. Also lack of patience. How many teachers will open the book for a child out of sheer frustration, open a book, get the pencil out, get the paper out? And we like to say to teachers, and of course parents, you already passed that grade. Let the child do it. Because very often a certain type of reluctant reader will either be very active, almost hyperactive, or they'll be very passive. And the hyper ones are just on the move all the time. But that's avoidance behavior. And the passive ones want to be camouflaged. And these kids are very smart because they know when the bell's going.
Now, what ages are you talking about here? Are you talking about full range or basically
We're talking basically in this book from grades 3 to grade 7.
3 to 7,
Yeah,
okay. And that's
looking
where
at that.
reading, just focusing on the skill is the big one. I mean, that's
Yes.
where you are.
Well, we're saying that there is certainly need to have certain skills that kids need. Comprehension skills, you need to look at that. But I don't believe there are 147 skills that a child needs. What the child needs is to hear the teacher read. They need to get caught up in the power of story. And with reluctant readers, one of the extrinsic pressures on the teacher is the time. We don't have enough time as teachers.
Are you seeing much difference between the Canadian classroom and the U.S. classroom in terms of the time allotted and the classroom size and so forth with regard to this age groups?
You know what's so interesting is that in both our countries it varies according to school districts.
Oh, of course,
It's really, and I guess I have to answer that no, in the sense that some districts have larger systems and also they have larger support staffs from that. So I wouldn't say that. I was just in Ohio 3 weeks ago and they had us come and talk about the book and do an all-day institute for the teachers, 400 teachers. But again, is to take a look at them, to make them aware, say, step back, look what you're doing. And also, like, all right, the curriculum, you're not going to achieve a set curriculum with these reluctant readers. So go with what they're interested in. If it's sports, then just go with that. Get the reading and writing is integrated. So let's get the kids reading and look at videos. Use their vision. They know videos. So let's bring everything that you possibly can in to get their interest. And then, because you're going to achieve much more from that. And if they're interested, they'll know the comprehension questions. They'll be able to answer it. They'll tell you, as a teacher, more than you know about some of these things.
The phenomenon of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic modalities wasn't really a common one when I went to school, and I think it's fairly recent phenomenon, the last 20 years or so. You're incorporating those concepts in your methods to reach those reluctant readers.
Yep.
For example, the physical, turning the page and following the activity. What are some of the other ways that you approach a kinesthetic reader?
Well, I see.
Reluctant.
Yeah, exactly. Is to keep him active, especially if he's one of those hyperactive kids. You've got to get them involved. They have to perceive reading as an active process. Now, you and I can do that. We can read a novel and we can be very involved in the story. But these kids don't see that. So that's why you have to have books that they can turn around, even game books. I mean, I never thought I would ever hear myself saying that some books which are not so desirable are actually great for these kids.
Right.
And now I'm saying, hey, if it works, go with it. Because that's a starting point. It's a starting point to make books friendly so that they will be excited about what they find. And you want books that have directions so that language play books and books that direct cookbooks, for instance, things that they can actually.
So that's the auditory aspect of those children with the heavy emphasis on that modality.
Yes,
would
but
say,
also
sure.
that they're holding the books. Or if they're craft type books, then they have to follow the instruction to make something, so that they see a direct purpose in what they're doing. And it's too easy for the teacher just to show how to do it. But if you challenge the child to say, okay, here's the instructions. Now, can we do this? Or if the parent does that.
There's an extraordinary, I don't want to really put words in your mouth here, but I mean, it seems to me that there's a kind of psychological profiling going on with regard to the child. I mean, there's an emphasis to do a profile, to understand how the child's mind works. And it's a rigorous process. It's required of teachers today, isn't it? Appropriately.
It's actually very demanding. I would simply because you want to find out the child is an individual, and we're also we're also multifaceted as individuals, and so you've got your likes, you've got your dislikes, you've got your abilities that the child knows he's got, but also the abilities that they don't know they have, and that's what we're looking for, to challenge them to try and go in new directions.
Are librarians approaching this similarly? I mean, are librarians taking advantage of this sort of approach to reach reluctant readers? And should they be?
Well, obviously they should be. All adults should be. But let's say I hope they are. And that's the only honest answer I can give. Maybe not, but I certainly hope they are. Because they want to do the best for the child. And they want to get the books to the children. They want to get the series that the kids enjoy.
And there was you had a definition which I thought quite good of literacy. I mean, it wasn't a standard definition that you just be able to read and grasp basically the idea, but that you had a sense of what was behind the idea, what was the motivation of the author in saying this particular thing, and being able to assess and evaluate that concept.
Yes. Well, that's to me is basic in our society today, because you look at the number of ads that children are faced with, and I understand it ranges from like 500 a day to sometimes 3,000 of the icons of companies that kids have to know. So they have to go beyond the basic level. They have to understand, what does that really mean? So it's not just a literal comprehension or literal literacy, but it's that whole comprehension.
Is that sort of standard in evaluating literacy? When we say that X number of the population is literate?
No, I think no, I don't think so. Basically, what you're saying, if the population is literate, well, they say the United States has 21% illiteracy rate, and that means that they cannot function at a grade 5 level of reading, which is filling in forms for work, for reading, comprehending a book or whatever at that grade 5 level. That's basically what that means. That does not mean visual literacy. It does not mean the incredible other types of literacies that we're faced with.
Right. And that is, as you say, a very important one, because it's essentially evaluating, not taking the printed word as truth, because you can't assume that, certainly.
Yeah, but a really good way to do that is for the teacher or the parent to read aloud and then talk with the child as a fellow reader at what's happening, always predicting. In other words, what do you think is going to happen? How is that person feeling? One of the great values of literature is to work on the senses. It's all right for kids to play on the computer and work on the computer, but that doesn't have a lot to do with our sensory awareness. We just looked in the newspaper yesterday talking about rage. Our society is in a rage. Road rage, air rage, all of these. But if we became a little more understanding of the other person and what they're thinking and what they're feeling, then this is exactly what's happening with using books to get into that.
Well, you're about in the fourth day, I guess, of the conference here, the Highlights Foundation Writers Conference. How's that going, and what sort of questions are you getting, and what are you learning from it yourself?
I always learn something myself. You learn something. I gave the keynote address, and you learn a lot by that, because you have to prepare, you see. And you have to remember that these adults have flown all day, and they're going to sit there, and you want to share poetry and literature with them. You want to motivate them. What I think is exciting is we have 100 people here who want to write for children, and we have the staff members who are saying, today was a session on humor, on storytelling, and saying, what is the best way to do that? What is the best? One of the sessions that I learned a great deal about was to look at dialogue, and actually it's with your next guest, Suzanne Fisher Staples, and looking at how she used dialogue in her book, and later she talked on plot structure. Well, when would-be writers listen to an experienced writer talk about that, then you gain insights. Now, I'm going back home and I'm teaching a class on trends and issues in children's literature Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And so many of the things that I'm picking up here, I'm certainly going to be relating back there. You pick up new titles of books that you hadn't thought about or heard about or seen. So I take that. So I get refreshed myself. You pick up an idea for use with reluctant readers. One today on humor, to cut out the cartoons and cut off the captions, and then let the kids try and brainstorm, because reluctant readers they don't have a great command of the language, and they don't see it as fun, and they don't see humor in language. They love humor. They love a good joke. Then that's why we have to use joke books. Get them going. Anything that gets them laughing. And so this way, by using this idea, so mentally I'm saying, that's what we're doing in the next teacher workshop that we do. We're going to use this strategy, which I picked up here. There are no new ideas. You just all of a sudden you realize, hey, that's a good one. Or I haven't done that before. And so I think that's significant. But one great idea, I'm going to cut right in here and get on to Harry Potter. Because, all right, because Harry Potter has brought more reluctant readers to books than anything else. And that is a lot due to the children in Britain found out the book first. And then, of course, we got the British edition in Canada. You have the revised edition. You have the American edition.
Yeah.
Not the Queen's. Yes, not the Queen's English. And so it's a little different in terminology. Actually, the fourth volume is 100-page longer than the books that the kids are reading in Canada. But that doesn't matter, because the kids are hooked. And I really congratulate the parents who have read. I was on a ferry a month ago, and I sat down, and lo and behold, over to my right was a mother and daughter. She was about 12, reading it together. And the mother would read, and then the daughter would read. And then when they paused, I said to them, "Are you enjoying that book?" And we had a wonderful talk. But the question that follows Harry Potter is, what book comes next? And that's where the public librarians are really good. Do you go to the Phantom Tollbooth? Have you hit that one? Have you gone on to some of the other books, the high fantasies? And those kids, because the kids now, all their friends are reading Harry Potter. It's a hard read. There's big words in there, you know?
Really.
It will never pass any controlled vocabulary, but that's great.
Yeah.
Because the kids are
So
set.
So the writer can override that controlled vocabulary
Obviously.
phenomenon.
Dr. Seuss was the example.
Really.
That's right. If the kids are enjoying it, if it's related to them, they'll go for it.
So did you see much of that phenomenon of dumbing us down with lower and lower, more simple words? Simple, not necessarily.
Oh, we've come through generations of that. I think what we're seeing now is that we're seeing where the publishers are starting to say, go with it, and let's try to get up. Yeah.
Really?
What they have to do is they have to put down that this book is at a certain readability level, and that's the challenge, because parents and teachers are saying, so what is readability is this at? Can my child read it? Well, the test for anything is open the book.
See if
Can
it
you
reads
read
it.
it? If they can read it, go for it.
Really. The whole idea, too, is to stimulate some interest in words and advanced concepts and so forth.
Exactly.
Or
Have fun.
whatever.
Have fun.
Yeah,
Make language
Doesn't
come alive.
I mean, it has to be a long word. If a nice short one will do, but
of course.
sometimes long words are the right ones.
Yes, and they should be word collectors and
Right.
make lists of vocabulary and illustrate words and play word games and anagrams and various things like that, and play with the kids, Scrabble and stuff like that, just to get kids involved.
Right. Word game.
But
Good.
whatever, if you want to say the last thing, I'll say, go with the kids, because what's in an interest today is out tomorrow. If they're interested, go for it.
Okay.
Good luck.
Well, Ron, thank you very much. It's great.
Thank you very much. Take care.
We've been talking to Ron Job, and he is the co-author of Reluctant Readers.
Yep.
And our next guest is the author of Shabanu, and we'll be bringing her up right now, so stay tuned. Hold on. Don't drop, don't switch, whatever. Thanks. Welcome back to Chautauqua Books. My next and last guest from the Chautauqua, from the Highlights Foundation, is Suzanne Fisher Staples. She's the author of Shabanu and several other books, novels. She was a UPI reporter in New Delhi and Hong Kong and the whole of Asia, pretty much, Pakistan, India, obviously. And it's a marvelous book, Shabanu. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
You have a sequel to this book.
Yes.
Two of them or just one?
Just one.
One sequel, right, yeah. I'm anxious to actually read it. I want to know what goes on next with this girl. A marvelous mass of research and a feel for the life of the Pakistan women and men and desert people, nomads. How did this come about? Did you...
Well, I took a few years away from news reporting. I had been working for the Washington Post and was very tired of not
So this was after UPI?
Yes, this was after UPI. And I went back to Pakistan and took a contract job with the United States Agency for International Development, working in rural areas, doing an assessment of projects involving women to improve the quality of life for families.
All right.
And that's how I got into the countryside. And it was wonderful because in Pakistan,
right.
They gave me language training, which was the key. That was really the key. And the means to travel where it was very difficult to travel.
And did you get a sense? Did you live in a sort of in a proximity of a village, or what the relationship?
Shabanu takes place in the Cholistan Desert, which is right along the border between India and Pakistan, which is a very troubled border, and so they limit very strictly who's allowed to go there. So I had to apply for permission. I could get permission for a week there, and then I had to come out and apply again, and maybe I'd get 2 weeks there. And I was very lucky in that a man in the Interior Ministry believed in what I was doing and gave me permission every time I asked. I don't think I'd be allowed to go now.
Really? And the reason today is that the turmoil, the fighting between Muslims and Hindus is much greater, or what?
No, not so much that as the United States dropped its aid package to Pakistan after the war in Afghanistan.
Right.
It became an issue with Congress. And
well, the Mujahideen play a small part in this,
Yes,
buying
they
the
do.
camels of the Shabanu's father and family, I guess. Interesting portrayal of them. Did you come across much of that, the Afghani?
a lot. I covered the war in Afghanistan as a newspaper reporter, so I knew a lot of the Mujahideen commanders in Peshawar in the northwest of Pakistan, and I knew that they went all over the country. They had tons of money to buy pack animals, to carry weapons and ammunition into Afghanistan to the Mujahideen factions that were fighting against the troops of the former Soviet Union.
Right. And that plays a part in this. I mean,
Yes.
they do raise the price of camels and other...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The economy of Pakistan was affected to an extreme by that.
Now, a book like this, how did you have in mind, I'm going to write a book for young women?
No.
What was your idea here?
Well, it's been a very long time since I was a child myself, and I don't have children. So I simply collected a number, at the end of the day, in the rural areas of Pakistan, in most places, or in many places, certainly in the Cholistan Desert, there's no electricity, so you don't listen to music or watch television. You sit around a fire and talk, tell stories. And so, in addition to the information for this study that I was doing about literacy and women, I collected these fabulous stories of women and their lives.
Firsthand?
Firsthand,
marvelous.
yes. And so...
And your language was sufficient up to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was... I had 6 months of intensive training, and then the more time I spent in the villages, the better my language became. So, and it actually, Urdu, the national language of Pakistan, was their second language as well. So they spoke slowly enough for me to understand. And
their first language is?
Is Saraiki, which is a desert language.
Oh.
So I was able to, I would go back to my tent, or if I was coming out of the desert, I would sit and record the stories that had been told to me in notebooks. So virtually every story in Shabanu and Haveli, the sequel to Shabanu, the stories are true stories about real people
Really?
and their lives.
Well, we ought to really, I'm sure that many of our audience, the kids and others, will have read this book, but it would be nice to give them, if they haven't, to give them a sense of the story, the plot. Would you do that for us?
Yeah, it's very hard to.
I'll do it.
Well, I was going to say to encapsulate what you spent 3 years writing.
Right,
Yeah.
I can do it.
The story of Shabanu basically is a story of a girl who's it's the year in which her sister is to be married, and she is a tomboy. These two girls are the only children of a family of camel herders, and so it's the last year in which Shabanu is free to
She's
roam.
11 and 12 years old.
11 and 12, yes. And her sister will be married as soon as she reaches puberty, which I should add is a custom that is very common in the countryside. In the city areas of Pakistan, things are modern. Well, in the cities, things are modernizing so that girls are girls are going to school and having
Maturation rate's longer.
jobs, and yes, and the economics are requiring that two parents in a family work. So, you know, economics plays a part in their lives too. But in the rural areas, still marriage is very young for girls at the time that they reach puberty. So Shabanu, since there are no sons in the family, Shabanu's job in the family is to look after the camels. And the family has a series of misadventures, including a drought, a terrible sandstorm, and I don't have to give away too much, do I?
No, no.
So she ends up the year in which her sister spends betrothed with a surprise at the end of it. So.
Poolan seems a conventional, what I would imagine to be, a Pakistani young girl. What about Shabanu? Did you meet a Shabanu, or is that a lot of
No,
yourself?
I did meet a Shabanu. She was a young girl whose real name was Mariam, and she was an orphan being raised by her grandmother, much more like the situation of Auntie Sharma and her daughter Fatima in the story. But she was a very independent young woman who was growing up in an unconventional family, because most families have boys in them. So the girls tend to be more focused on marriage and playing at being mothers and wives and so forth. But Shabanu, because her job in the family is looking after the family camels, grows up being more of a tomboy. And this girl, Mariam, was in the same situation. She was helping her grandmother look after the camels and the goats, and she didn't want very much to be married.
And what became of her? What was her fate in
Well,
reality?
she was betrothed to be married to a young man who was called a tail-end farmer at the very end of the irrigation system, which is surprising because as a desert nomad, that was a real step up for her and her family to be married to a young man whose family owned land. They're very poor farmers because they get the very last bit of the water in the irrigation system. But then I left Pakistan, and there was a terrible drought in progress when I was there, and so she and her grandmother moved out of the desert, and I left, and so I assume she married as planned.
In your familiarity with Pakistan and India and so forth, do you see much Pakistan literature that is similar in its purpose, objective to this?
Not very much. I see.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
I see more literature by Pakistanis who come and live in the United States. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the woman. There's a woman who lives in Boston who writes beautifully about life as a woman who's straddling cultures. Of course, the Indian literature is just fabulous in English. Well, there's a brand new, in the last 10 years, resurgence of Indians writing in English as not translated books, but books originally written in English. So, and those are just fabulous. They're beautifully the language is just scintillating, and it just makes me very happy to be able to read it.
What about the folks, the non-writers in the U.S., Pakistanis? Are they coming to you, and I mean, are they reading Shabanu and communicating that to you? Saying,
Yes,
this is interesting stuff?
It's been very interesting to me to have particularly Pakistani girls who are, their parents are Pakistani and they've been living in this country for some time. A lot of the parents want their children to have a good knowledge of the culture that they come from, and this is difficult for them unless there's a large population in the school that they go to. So a lot of children have come up to me and said, you know, this is my culture, and they feel very proud of it. And so the parents are very happy that there's a book about their culture that their kids makes their children feel proud. So that's very gratifying.
In Valerie and Walter's book, the guidebook for children's books, best books, I believe it was Valerie that said she wanted to go out and get a camel after this. That was her response. You could understand that, certainly. The pet
I
camel.
liked camels a lot,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. You clearly did.
I did like camels.
They're rough beasts, but interesting ones. What was your relationship? Do you have some close riding in them and so forth?
Yes, my first really close exposure to camels was going to the Sibi Fair, which Shabanu goes to with her father.
That's very close to Afghanistan.
It is, yes. It's in Baluchistan, and we walked through the pass, the Bolan Pass, with a group of nomads and went to the Sibi Mela that way. So it was a very interesting glimpse into nomadic life. The nomads were different from Shabanu's people. They actually had come from the mountains in the area called Job in Afghanistan. But during the non-mating season, camels are very sweet-tempered. But during the mating season, unfortunately, is 6 months out of the year, and they're really quite vile-tempered during that
They
period.
didn't spit
So-
in this book.
No, and I kept asking the herdsmen, and they didn't know what I was talking about, so it must be a camel culture thing. I don't know. I never did see a camel spit, so...
Okay, good. Well, there's a graphic scene of a birth. I mean, that was one of the more upfront early scenes of Shabanu saving a camel that had been bitten by a snake, the mother had.
Right.
What is it to you, and I think Walter said it very succinctly, it's a book that has a child as its hero, main focus. But how would you distinguish an adult book versus a child's book on, say, a book on Pakistan? Would it be pretty much the same, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, clearly, yeah. Go ahead.
There are a lot of adult novels that have young protagonists. And I actually did not write Shabanu and Haveli, or in fact any of my books, as children's books or as young adult novels. I think it's the part of my own development, my own life, that I'm most interested in. I really like young people. As I mentioned, I don't have children, so I don't do it on purpose. I just tell stories in the way that is natural to me. And at first, I wasn't very excited about having my books end up in the field of children's literature.
Yeah, I thought that.
Well, I didn't want it to be limited.
Right, yeah.
But in fact, I'm so delighted to be there now, and it's a very, very nice place to be.
Yeah.
I feel as though young adult publishing, children's publishing is. The great emphasis still remains on publishing good books, and
Really?
that's very
A
nice.
librarian friend of mine said that if you want to know something about something, read a kid's book first, because the fact checkers are the best in the kid's book. Is that your experience? I
It
mean,
has been in mine. My publisher at present is Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and Elaine Chubb was the copy editor, and she found some wonderful things that really saved me a lot of embarrassment. I was writing about steam trains because that was how I traveled a lot when I was in India and Pakistan. In fact, there hadn't been a steam train line in Pakistan for, I think it was 4 years. So Elaine was the one who caught that. She's just
Really?
a fabulous fact checker as well as copy editor. So.
Well, two things. We're running out of time, but two things I wanted to ask you about. One, the relationship with Pulan, the older sister, 2 years older roughly, right? And Shabanu. There seems to be, Shabanu is very tolerant of the kind of romantic And yet she has a sense of who her sister is. And it's a very nice relationship that doesn't become, there's no animosity there. But there should be almost animosity between the father, and yet she holds to this man who's basically sold her into something else. We can't really talk about that, can we? What happens? Can you tell us the sequence, a little sense of what her relationship with her father becomes when she's married?
Well, she doesn't see her father very much after she's
I wouldn't either
married.
if I were her.
I think most young women know that the traditions that are imposed upon them are very strong. It's not like in the United States, where there are many levels on which we can be successful as individuals. There's really only one way there, and it's her father was protecting her and fearing
Surely.
for her very life.
yeah.
You know, if she stepped outside the
I did get a
norm.
sense of that. Is that changing? I mean, are events changing? I mean, you
Yes.
have a whole lot of economic phenomenon, the World Bank, IMF, kind of economic policies that are just changing countries all over the world rather rapidly, wiping out cultures and so forth. What's happening there, changing it?
Well,
Because
it's
of
changing
globalism, for example.
right. It's changing very slowly in the countryside. The
surely.
trickle down doesn't go very far down, unfortunately, very quickly in places like Pakistan. It's still a very feudal society in
Really?
many ways.
Really?
But in the cities, life is much more modern. I mean, I was amazed after having lived in Asia for many, many years and then coming back to Pakistan to see more people walking around with cell phones than I
Really?
saw in my own town. So.
You know, one of the things I was thinking that, well, I got it. I got the idea here. Kids' books don't really talk about politics and don't really talk about... And then all of a sudden you started talking about politics, and I blew that out of the water. So it's a comprehensive book and great fun and a nice
Thank
read.
you. Thank you.
And thank you for being my guest.
You're welcome. It was nice to be here.
I think we're out of time, so that's it for Chautauqua Books. We've been talking to Suzanne Fisher-Staples. Her book is Shabanu, and I'm in the library here in Mayville, and the libraries all over the western part of New York have them, so take a look at them. And thanks for watching Chautauqua Books.